You can think of RESTful URIs as belonging to two types: instance resource URIs and collection resource URIs. So when you've designed URIs for messages, comments, likes, and shares in the previous tutorial, let's quickly recap. So a message is accessible at /messages/message ID, and comments is the message URI /comments/comment ID, similarly likes and shares. So these URIs are great when you want to look up a particular message or a particular comment or like or a share. So these are called instance resource URIs. A single instance of a message or a comment is accessible by this instance resource URI. So these kind of instance resource URIs typically have a unique ID of the resource in the URI to identify what is the instance that you are interested in. So to get a message with a particular ID, use the instance URI for that ID. Now, what if you want to get all messages? The answer is simple. Just access /messages. That's it. Again, this is analogous to a simple static site with HTML pages. Accessing a directory gives you the contents of the directory, all the contents of that directory. So think of /messages as a top level directory for all messages, and accessing that URI gives you a list of all messages. Similarly, if you need all the comments made for message ID 2, the URI is /messages/2/comments. Again, this is like the directory for all the comments for message 2. These URIs are different from the URIs we saw in the previous tutorial. They do not represent a particular resource, but rather a collection or a list of resources. So they're called collection URIs. These URIs pull up a collection of instance resources. So this also explains why resource names are in plural. They help the client understand that they're working with a collection of resources with this kind of a URI. Again, some examples: /messages returns all messages, /profiles returns all profiles, /messages/message ID /comments returns all the comments for that message ID. Similarly, /likes and /shares follow the message ID. This shows you the advantage of nesting related resources like this, like messages and comments. So if you want all the comments for a message ID, there you go, that's the collection URI. But this also brings up a problem. What if you need a list of all the comments irrespective of which message they're associated with? This URI is not good enough for that because you have to provide a message ID. This is why a decision has to be made about how you want these resources accessed. You could have had a /comments as a root resource, in which case it's actually easy to get all the comments. But in that case, it would probably not be as easy to get all the comments for a particular message because there's no message ID in the comments resource URI. So this is where you have to make that trade-off. And I chose not to provide an option to get all comments. I wanted to make it easy for the client to get all comments for a message, but not as easy to get all the comments in the system because I felt that it's not a very common use case. I wouldn't want the client to make a request to get all the comments. I don't think they would want that. It's going to be a huge list. So again, this is something that you decide. There's no right or wrong. Okay, so when you have collection URIs like this, there needs to be a way to filter the result. It's not so much a problem for this comment URI. Getting all the comments for a message is typically not going to be a big list. But imagine this /messages URI. When you do a GET request, you get all the messages. There's probably going to be a lot of data, and the client probably doesn't want all this data. We should design our API to provide a way for the client to paginate or filter the results. One way to do this is by providing query parameters. We have so far avoided query parameters in our URIs, but filtering and pagination is actually a good scenario to use them. One standard practice is to provide pagination by having two query parameters. One is the starting point and one is the page size. For example, consider this URI: /messages, ? offset equals 30, and limit equals 10. This URI fetches messages starting from message number 30 and it returns the next 10 messages. So the offset and limit parameters correspond to the starting point and the page size values. The offset parameter tells you where the client wants to start, and the limit tells you how many records the client wants. This, of course, assumes a specific order in which you are returning the messages, because whatever order you return for the first page obviously has to be the same order you're returning for the subsequent pages. This order could be chronological, it could be ID based. Irrespective of that, you need to make sure that the right order is maintained. But as long as you do that, you can allow the client to paginate by using these two parameters. You can also choose to implement other kind of filters using these query parameters. Take, for example, retrieving messages based on date. Let's say you want to provide the clients a feature where they can retrieve messages posted on a given year. You could have them send a request like this, /messages, year equals 2014. This returns all the messages made in the year 2014. This is, of course, something you can use with pagination, because again, this is probably going to be a huge list. So with pagination, you can have year equals 2014 along with the offset and the limit parameters. So to summarize, there are two types of RESTful URIs. One is an instance resource URI that identifies a specific instance of a resource. And another is collection URIs, which represent a collection of resources. Typically, collection resource URIs end in a plural, like messages or comments or products and so on. And they're typically a portion of the resource URI, because a instance resource URI has the collection URI followed by a unique identifier. And finally, you can implement query parameters as a way of achieving filtering and pagination when accessing collection URIs. I encourage you to do the exercises where you'll practice writing some resource URIs, both instance and collection, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.